Everyone. In this video, I wanted to go over the assignments for this week because they are a little bit different from what we've done before. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll take a look at reading and the tasks for this week. So one thing about the reading is that, as you see in the announcements, there's a lot of shorter works as opposed to focusing on one longer work. So basically, we're looking at poetry this week. I've posted some of my personal thoughts on the poems and how they're connected to each other. But it's a lot of shorter works for the reading. So that makes some of the our typical assignments, like the discussion question and the comprehension assignment or quizzes, a little trickier. So what I wanted to do, let's start with the discussion. As opposed to just opening it up so that everybody's asking a question about a completely different work, I narrowed the discussion to the two prose pieces that you're reading. So the two ones that are not poetry. The excerpt from Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan and the excerpt from Margaret Cavendish's The Blazing World. So what I would like you to do is, depending on your last name, choose a quotation from one of these works. So if your last name begins with AP and we're going alphabetically, of course, to MIC, then I want you to choose a quotation from the Leviathan excerpt. Okay. If your last name begins MIL going to TR, then I want you to choose a quotation from The Blazing World. All right, and just like normally, you're going to introduce the quotation with a complete thought, followed by a colon, give the quotation with a parenthetical citation, then followed by a works cited entry. All right, so the first part of this is just figuring out which work you're choosing the quotation from. All right, so everyone is choosing. So roughly half of you are choosing a quotation from Leviathan. Roughly half of you are choosing a quotation from The Blazing World. All right. Now here's where it gets even trickier. For your responses, even though you're doing a quotation from one of the works, I want you to respond to questions from the other. All right. So if you're doing The Blazing World, you're responding to questions about Leviathan and vice versa. Okay. So that way, I do want you to be engaged with both works here. So you're asking a question about one and then writing responses about the other. All right. And the responses should be at least 50 words each, just like how we normally do it. Okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing you have to do is the comprehension assignment, and this is in assignments. Okay. And this is the one where I'm having you focus on the poetry. All right. Okay, so here what you're going to do is find one example of figurative language in each of the poems assigned this week. All right, so there are 8 total. So you're going to find 8 examples of figurative language from the poems. And I've given you a handout where I go over, these aren't all the types of figurative language, but these are the most common, and I think the ones, these are the ones that I would like you to focus on for this assignment. So when we say figurative language as opposed to literal language, so in figurative language, the intended meaning transcends the literal meaning. In other words, we can't fully understand what the words are saying or what the person is trying to say with just the literal meanings of the word. So if I say, can I borrow your car, or may I borrow your car, then you can understand that sentence by just understanding the literal meanings of the words. All right. But figurative language, you can't. The meaning in some way transcends, or in some cases is even different from the literal meaning of the words. So Um, so I put this into three types of figurative language that are sometimes confused with each other. Um, Sometimes figurative language is making a comparison, and this is what we're talking about when we use the words metaphor, simile, or personification. Right? We're comparing unlike things. So, so if I say, the runner is a cheetah on the racetrack, okay, that would be a metaphor. All right. So I'm not literally saying that the runner is a cheetah. I'm making a comparison between a runner and a cheetah. All right. Um, a simile is basically the same as a metaphor, except we're using like or as. So we're making the comparison a little more explicit. Here, the runner is like a cheetah on the racetrack. But it's important to understand that a simile, it's only a simile if we're comparing things that require some imaginative leap for us to understand, right? The intended meaning has to transcend the literal meaning in some way. So if I take two coffee cups and I say, this coffee cup is like, or let's say I have a coffee cup, you have a coffee cup, and I say, hey, my coffee cup is like your coffee cup. That is not a simile, right? Because we're comparing two things that are similar, not two things that are in most ways completely fundamentally different. All right. So so that's a simile. Personification, something inhuman is described as if it had human traits. Almost the opposite of what I was doing with our metaphors and simile examples. So if I say the angry storm battered the ships, all right, I'm treating the storm as if it's a person, as if it has emotions. Okay, that would be personification. All right, the next two have funny names, if you're not familiar with the names. I mean, they're not really funny, but unusual names. Synecdoche and metonymy. And they're often confused with each other, but the difference between this category of figurative language and the other, here we're making comparisons. Here we're substituting one name for another. All right. So if I call my car my wheels, or if I say the U.S. won the gold medal instead of the U.S. Olympic team, that would be an example of synecdoche. I'm using the part of something to refer to the whole, or vice versa. Okay. If you're watching a movie and the movie takes place on a boat and the captain says all hands on deck, okay, he's referring to the workers using a part of their body, hands, to refer to them as a whole. All right, so we're substituting the name workers with the name hands, and that's a synecdoche. If we're doing it by we're substituting a part for the whole, or vice versa. Okay. Metonymy is very similar, except here we're substituting an associated place or idea, so not necessarily a part of something. So if I refer to the White House instead of the President of the United States, that's metonymy, right? So if you hear the White House has no comment, that's metonymy. What that means is the president has no comment, right? So the White House is not part of the president. It's just a building that's associated with the president that we sometimes use to refer to the president. Same thing if you hear Hollywood being used to refer to the film industry, right? So Hollywood, hands on deck, Hollywood is not part of the film industry. It's just the city where most of the action in the film industry happens, right? So a lot of times people will just use the word Hollywood, and they're not talking about the city. They're talking about the movie. They're talking about movies and motion pictures. Even a saying like the pen is mightier than the sword. What that means is that ideas are more powerful than acts of violence. Okay, so we're associating ideas with the pen. The pen is associated with ideas. Swords are associated with acts of violence, right? that's what, we're not literally saying that if I have a pen and you have a sword, I'm going to win. Okay. That would be another example of metonymy. Okay. So we've had comparison, substitution, representation is the third category here, and that's symbolism, right? So the difference between symbolism and, say, a metaphor is with symbolism, we're not making a comparison. We're saying that some image or object represents an idea, right? So if you have a significant other and you give that significant other a rose, okay, that rose represents your love, your affection for that person, okay? You're not necessarily comparing your love to a rose, though you could. People have done that before, and then the rose would be a metaphor. But anytime that there's an image or idea, or an image or an object that represents an idea, that's symbolism. Okay, and then irony is a discrepancy. Right, a discrepancy is a difference or an inconsistency. A discrepancy in meaning, intention, or expectation. So, and I like the word discrepancy because it has this connotation of there's sort of a distance between our expectation and reality, or our intended meaning and the literal meaning of the words. So there are three types of irony. Literal irony is when the actual meaning is the opposite of the literal meaning. Okay. So if I say, I'm so excited for this tornado drill, essentially I'm being sarcastic. So sarcasm is literal irony. Again, if you just go by the literal meaning of the words, then, that's the opposite of what I really mean, that I am not excited for the tornado drill. Situational irony is what happens is the opposite of what a definition suggests should happen. So if the fire station burns down, if the police station gets robbed, if the teacher learns from the students, okay, these would all be examples of situational irony, okay, because it's always connected in some way to a definition, right? So just because, if I'm sitting in my office and then a clown jumps out from behind the desk, okay, that would be surprising. That would be I did not expect that, but it wouldn't really be ironic because there's nothing, it's not connected in some way to, a definition or a meaning. It's just random. Same thing if, just because something is the opposite of what you want, that doesn't necessarily make it ironic too. So if it rains on your wedding day, it's not really ironic, or at least it's kind of a stretch to consider it ironic. If your wedding day is what causes you to break up with your fiance, that would be ironic, right? Because it's the definition of a wedding day is that it's a day in which you're supposed to come together in marriage. So if that's what breaks you up, is the stress of the wedding day, then yeah, there's irony there. And then the last one, dramatic irony, is when the audience knows something in a story that a character in the story does not know. And this is utilized in pretty much every horror movie that you've ever seen. So the babysitter hears a noise upstairs, and so is going upstairs into the dark rooms to investigate. And there's tension because we know that, either we know that there is, danger upstairs and the babysitter doesn't know that. That's dramatic irony. That dramatic irony gives it that tension. Or we just know that we're watching a horror movie and bad things happen when babysitters go upstairs into dark rooms. And even just that awareness is dramatic irony. Like, we know that this is a dangerous situation. The babysitter does not know that. And so sort of the difference between what we know, the distance between what we know and what the babysitter knows, is the irony. Okay, so those are the types of irony. So what I want you to do is give the quotation and citation from the quotation with no introductory statement. So you're not doing it like you're doing the discussion board where you have to give an introductory statement. Just give the quotation, the parenthetical citation. I don't need the works cited entry for each one. Don't give me works cited entries for this. Just quotation, parenthetical citation, and then in like 1 to 2 sentences, what is this? What type of figurative language is this, and how is it an example of figurative language? So this is right here is an example of what one answer would look like. So give the give the work first, title of the work first. Because these are poems, the poems are going to be in quotation marks, not italics. Okay, but give the title of the work first, then the quotation. Okay, make sure if it's more than one line, you give a forward slash to break up the lines, parenthetical citation, and then here's your explanation. In this example of personification, the feeling love is described as a human with both eyes and a mind, as if this feeling had its own will and preferences. Okay, so notice that my explanation does not say, in this example of personification, something inhuman is described as if it were human. So you can't just repeat the definition of figurative language. It has to be analysis. Like you have to explain how that definition applies specifically here. So instead of something inhuman, the feeling love is described as human. And then I explain how it's described as human because it has eyes and a mind in this quotation. And then I go on and explain, like why this is what this means. It's acting as if this feeling had its own will and had its own preferences. Okay, so that's how I want you to do it. Again, I'm not looking for a really long, in-depth analysis, just an explanation of what makes this figurative language. So you need to explain what kind it is, and then specifically how this quotation is an example of that figurative language. So essentially, you're going to do this 8 times. Okay. Okay. So 1 from each poem. All right. You don't have to use all the different types of figurative language, but I do want to see some variety. I don't want, for example, you to give me 8 examples of metaphor, right? So, try to find some different types of figurative language. But, if you have more than one metaphor, that's also fine. You're going to submit this as a Microsoft Word document with an MLA heading, just as you do your responses, and you're going to submit it to this Lincoln assignment, the comprehension assignment, just like you ordinarily do. Make sure that you attach your file, browse local files, choose your file, and submit it. And make sure that it is submitted correctly before you close the window. All right, so you should be able to see your assignment on the next page. Before you close the window, it's your responsibility to make sure that it has been submitted on time. Okay, so that's it for this video. The comprehension assignment, it counts the same as the quiz, right? So, if you've got some quizzes that you did not do well on, this is an opportunity to pull up your comprehension grade without having to take a quiz. Okay. All right. So if you have questions, then please email me. So if you have questions, please email me. And this is all due by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Thank you. Have a great day.